So this video is going to get nasty for all the right reasons. I saw this advertised on X about little over a week ago. Uncle Hotep versus Marc Lamont Hill, with Hotep Jesus moderating. The topic of the debate, Kamala Harris's blackness and her efficacy for the black community. So in essence, the merit of being fake. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with Uncle Hotep, though I do know Hotep Jesus, and Marc Lamont Hill I remember because he was on Fox News several years ago with Patrice O'Neal talking about Don Imus calling a bunch of black female basketball players nappy-headed hoes, and Patrice, being Patrice, naturally whooped everyone's ass. Now, if you're familiar with my style of presentation here, normally what I would do is build up some credibility before I go in for the jugular, and then I kind of go off the rails. I'm going to forego that formula here and state this from the outset. Marc Lamont Hill is a radical far-left black identitarian. He will likely never call himself that, but I've never been one to sugarcoat around here. He's a man in his mid-40s who supports the Green Party, and has for about 20 years now, and therefore he's a moron who hasn't learned anything about politics in about 20 years, other than that grifting is a thing. As a matter of fact, I can utterly decimate all of his political acumen and intellectual credibility in under 3 seconds without even saying a word. Watch this.
And get pregnant.
Depends.
And there we go. The funny thing is, this dude claims to be an abolitionist and that the whole system is corrupt. No one has any clean hands, so naturally he endorsed Kamala Harris and praised the selection of radical far-leftist Tampon Timmy. Hell, he even defended the tampon thing, because some of the people menstruating identified as boys and were using the boys' bathroom. Look at this tweet. I don't understand. I applauded the choice of Waltz and publicly endorsed Kamala. Why would I need to be checked on? Yeah, I only publicly endorsed the most ill-spoken alcoholic, allegedly, of a candidate that was forced upon us, all the while condemning corruption. Why would anyone think there's something wrong with me? The level of quality of political hustlers today is embarrassing. I mean, look at everyone involved in this post and tell me any of these people are mentally stable. I'm not kidding, there is a serious problem with mental illness in the Western Hemisphere. Marc Lamont Hill is a pretty skilled rhetorician if you happen to be talking to a herd of troglodytes. If you were playing an RPG, right, he'd be the kind of person that dumps 1 skill in intelligence and say 9 in charisma. He can manipulate the dullards within the 1 intelligence sphere pretty well enough, but anyone else outside of that will instantly finger him as the shallow, incoherent, unimpressive, gaslighting, two-faced, hypocritical, snake oil-peddling charlatan that he is. And in this debate, he utterly dominates the conversation. But only in terms of volume of words spoken. As far as government, power, anything substantive about policy goes, the man is an idiot who knows fuck all about politics. Here's how I would describe this debate, alright? Imagine a group of people, some utterly clueless of politics, witless idiots. The others have an IQ above room temperature, and they're all entertained by a boxing spectacle. Except the former group is only hearing it on radio, and all they hear is the sound of hits and punches. But that's it. The latter, however, are watching it, and they see one man who's drunk and swinging wildly. Only most of the punches are him hitting himself in the face. So the strategy for a debate like this seems to be contingent almost entirely on what you think the composition of the audience will be. If it's the witless radio listeners, they'd probably think Mark won, even though he said bugger all worthy of listening to. But on the other hand, if they're the watchers, they would likely think Mark lost purely on the basis of him verbally punching himself in the face repeatedly. I can't say Uncle Hotep won, more so that Mark lost, simply by showing how ignorant and stupid he is when it comes to anything substantive. The man is the epitome of empty calories. This is how the debate started.
And this debate here was brought together by Nerd Nash. Shout out to Nerd Nash, nerdnash.com. And it came off of this tweet right here. I'm going to put the tweet on the screen right now. You guys should see it here. Marc Lamont Hill tweeted, "Nothing is more fascinating than watching black Republican men like Byron Donalds questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris. Dude has a white wife and biracial kids. Why is he comfortable identifying them as black, but not Kamala Harris?" To which Uncle Hotep responded, "None of what you said makes Byron Donald not black." Mark, did you see that tweet? Did you see that response?
I remember my tweet. I didn't see Uncle Hotep's response. He's probably not on my probably got him muted or something because he bullies me online so much. I feel intimidated very often. I might file a report, but I think part of my frustration with Twitter is that Twitter often makes a spectacle of the quote tweet, and you drop the flying elbow on your opponent, and everybody on your side goes ooh, and they don't actually hear what I said. They spend so much time responding to what I didn't say that they, like, even what you just said, right? Uncle Hotep responded, none of what you just said makes Byron Donaldson less black, right? But if you read my tweet, what did I say? I said, I don't understand how he's comfortable doing what?
How he's comfortable. What'd you say, Unc?
No, go ahead. I want the moderator to read it so we clear.
Yeah. Nothing more fascinating than watching black Republican men like Byron Donalds questioning the racial identity of Kamala Harris. So he's questioning her racial identity, and you brought up.
No, but what's the last part of what I said?
Why is he comfortable identifying them as black but not Kamala?
Yeah, identifying them as, who's them? His kids.
His kids.
So then he jumps in and says, none of that makes him less black. So the reader would think that I was questioning Byron Donald's blackness. And I never said a word about his blackness. I said his kids. So again, it's a misrepresentation of the argument, right?
Have you ever noticed people like this consider talking some kind of verbal wankathon? They talk so much ass, but they say nothing. Their words have no value whatsoever. Case in point, look at the nonsense this idiot argues about. But notice the tweet there, black Republicans. That has no relevance to the overall point here at all, which is genetics. And yet he's bringing up political affiliation. Why? Because he is a far-left radical and he wants to make the enemy distinction. Simple as. Pay attention to the little details, folks. No one would think you're directly talking about Byron Donalds' so-called blackness. You said them. There's obviously a reference to his children because them is plural. Duh. However, you are talking indirectly about his so-called blackness. The reason why he is calling Kamala Harris's racial identity into question is because she was billed as the first Indian senator in California. Hell, she was coasting on that for most of her career. She was never black until she started running against Trump. The reason why Byron Donalds is comfortable calling his kids black is because he knows the racial identity of his children. He knows the racial makeup of their father. Because it's him. I can't believe I have to explain that. And lastly, the racial makeup of his children is not ambiguous and used in a cynical ploy for political gain. Moving on.
I personally don't care if people think Kamala Harris is black or not.
Oh, yes, you do. You really, really do.
To me, I don't support or not support somebody based purely on their blackness.
Remember that because he's going to lie about that later, as well as so many other things.
People are saying that someone is not black. And we have to talk about what black means to different people, right?
Less than 2 minutes ago.
And I think she's black. To me, black is so broad and vague, and this is the last thing I'll say, black is so broad and vague and ambiguous at times that it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
So, you want to make a distinction about what black means to different people. You think Harris is black, but you also think it doesn't necessarily mean anything. That is a rather wordy way of saying I'm a rambling idiot who makes no fucking sense.
For me, here in the United States, I include Jamaicans as black. Yeah, I include black Dominicans as black. Yeah, I include all these people as black. But they're not descendants of slavery. And so, to me, it's like, well, when we start talking about reparations...
If there is one word that makes anyone with an IQ higher than Pelosi's eyebrows think you're nothing more than a grifting loser, it's that word.
When we start talking about what we deserve, when we start talking about our history and the culture of African Americans here, she ain't that. Kamala Harris ain't African American. But she is black. And black is global. African American is very specific.
Black is global insofar as it's a description of skin color across the globe. But different black tribes are definitely a distinction. Also, you think no blacks outside of American blacks were ever enslaved? Really? Or is it just specifically white Americans you want to steal from to justify your cheap envy?
And for me, that means descendants of slavery. She's not that. I'm not claiming she's that. I'm just saying that a whole bunch of mixed race people are claiming they mixed people and they mixed babies and trying to deny hers. That was the only point I was making. And it was somewhat tongue in cheek, but I still think it's true.
That's amazing. You said a whole truckload of words.
I did.
That had no meaning.
Wow, a whole load of rambling bollocks that would tell a sane, functional person who's paying attention to the news you don't even know what Byron Donaldson's issue was to begin with. And then again, look at the source. I'm not remotely surprised.
We often selectively pull evidence to support our claims, right?
Really? You don't say.
So we're looking at a Mindy Kaling interview that Kamala Harris did in the last 10 years, probably in the last 5 years. Kamala Harris is 60, and I hope we can call her Kamala, not Kamala. Her name is Kamala. We should call her Kamala.
Until she can buy a bag of Doritos without making my bones hurt, I will keep calling her Kamala.
She's 60, so she gave that at 55. We have far more evidence of her ensconced in Black culture, if that's the criterion, than we do of her being ensconced in Indian culture. When you look at high school photos of her, when you look at the music she grew up listening to, and I know you can find a selective photo and fake it till you make it. You can turn on Blackness. I think that's far more applicable for Obama, frankly, than I do Kamala Harris. I think Barry from Hawaii had a whole lot more cultural transformation when he ran for office than Kamala Harris did. But that notwithstanding,
do keep that point in mind for a bit.
She is multiracial. Now, I happen to believe, based on how America functions, that multiraciality at the biological and genealogical level is important. But how do the police see you? How do people read you on the street? How do white people understand you when they're about to do something racist, right?
Now, you see, when you people feel comfortable saying snide stuff like that, I'm not going to lose sleep when bad things happen to you. Hell, I might even crack a smile because you're a wanker.
My point is ultimately, and Uncle Hotep made an interesting point about, what about the people who only vote for somebody based on the single issue of them being Black? I'm saying that's foolish anyway. Do you know how many Negroes out here don't care about Negroes? Do you know how many people here are indisputably Black, could go all the way back to Kunta Kinte, not a drop of white blood in them, and still would do everything they could to lock your ass up and take away your rights and not build the Black economy?
Just come out and say you hate white people already. Trust me, you'll feel a whole lot better. I know I will. Means I can justify a whole bunch of language Uncle Ruckus would very much approve of. Far as building the Black community goes, we call those Blacks based because they're smart enough to recognize one does not build an economy with a bunch of criminals around because no business wants to be around there. Which is why the moment any Black people get money, the first thing they do is get the hell away from other Black people. Go and ask the Obamas the demographic makeup of their neighborhood, or buying a lot of mansions where they bought all that real estate. You want to know what people really think of your race? Follow their money.
So for me, I don't choose my candidate based on their Blackness. Now, the tie goes to the Negro. If two people are neck and neck, I'm going to pick the Black person. And maybe if a Black person a little behind, I might, if they're in the same vicinity, because I happen to love Black people in that way.
Oh, really? Before it was foolish to vote for someone based on their race, but when you do it, it's fine because you happen to love Black people that way. These people have no shame whatsoever.
But my primary criterion for choosing who's going to be president or vice president or mayor or dog catcher is, do they have our interests at heart?
Anyone ever notice how America's supposed to be this grand melting pot, but every demographic sticks together and are allowed to advocate for their own, except those of European heritage? Why is that? When everyone else does it, it's racial solidarity, but when Europeans do it, it's white supremacy. Again, I wonder why. Our interest is code for how much is the state willing to pay us for existing while Black. That is all that means. The same way reparations is race hustlers speak for losers demand a wealth transfer. Whereas smart, hard-working Black people are the same as every other American. Put criminals in jail, make petrol cheaper, and lower my damn taxes. Tell me I'm lying.
I think, now this is just me. This is me when I put my Hotep bag. Presidential candidates are picked decades beforehand. You know what I'm saying? Years beforehand. Sometimes when they're just infants. Kamala, you might be one. You got that good Indian ancestry. But you're a little shaky on the Blackness. Need you to go to Howard, learn the Blackness. And they knew they were going to get all these Indian influxes of immigrants. She's the perfect candidate, but she doesn't have the charisma. If she was charisma, she might be this might be an open and shut election. She just doesn't have it.
Now, whether or not you agree with that, that's still an interesting perspective.
So, I disagree with everything you just said.
Of course you do. It might challenge you to think of hypotheticals, and your brain just isn't built for that.
The second point, this idea that there's a decades-long conspiracy to make certain people president, I ain't mad at you for that one, right? But let me tell you something. They ain't picking niggas. They don't go, you know what? I want somebody 40 years from now, 60 years from now to be, I mean, Kamala Harris is 60 years old. I mean, she was born in 1964. Black people couldn't even vote. Are you telling me the same government that in 1964 wouldn't allow black people to sit at lunch counters into public accommodations in 64, wouldn't allow them to have civil rights and voting in 1965, decided that they were going to pick a product of what they would call miscegenation, that they would find this random ass black Jamaican Indian girl and say, you know what, I'm gonna make her president over the Negroes that ain't allowed to vote.
They picked Obama.
What I'm saying is that
if you watch the whole debate, you will notice this. The moment that he's hit with something that he can't refute, he will turn into a sputtering mess and his brain buffers in real time, trying to think of a strategy to avoid the point just made. Like all leftists, he can't address anything head on. Lying in misdirection is all they have.
There is no lifelong conspiracy to appoint presidents who look like us. Yes, there are people who are groomed for this. They're white men. They've always been white men. They always will be white men.
Okay, then explain Obama. Are you going to? No, of course he isn't, because he can't. But let's look at HBCUs for a second, right? The first one was Cheney University of Pennsylvania in 1837. That's almost 2 centuries ago. In 1890, Congress passed the Second More Real Act, requiring states to offer land grants for black schools if they were not already. Look at the state of the country now. Affirmative action, the DEI nonsense. How can you be openly hostile to those of European heritage and nothing happens? Give me a frickin' break.
Over time, here's the other reason why that doesn't make sense. Kamala Harris is somebody who, let me put it differently. Black people, unfortunately, because we're often so politically immature, will vote for any black person because they're black. You ain't gotta go to Howard. You ain't gotta do none of that shit. You could come in here at Carlton Banks. If you black, we gonna vote for you. Look at Barack Obama. Nobody, niggas like, he got a funny name. We don't know him. We're not voting for him. Then Iowa happened. When he won Iowa, niggas was like, wait, we can have a black president? Oh, we don't care about Jesse no more. We don't care about Al no more. We gonna throw away all our leaders. Oh, we love the black. Don't nobody love the Clintons more than black people for all the wrong reasons, but they do. But as soon as they had the opportunity for a black president, what did they do? They said, "Sorry, Miss Hillary," and they probably called her Miss Hillary. "Sorry, Miss Hillary, we going with a black person." That's why the Clintons felt so disrespected, because they feel like they own Negroes, and the Negroes they owned and sponsored somehow gave up on it. My point being that you don't need to have a conspiracy to blackify a black candidate to get black people to vote for him.
Okay, the race apparently is not a factor, but he does concede the grooming of candidates is real. Though with the outlier Obama, you did admit earlier a cultural transformation was necessary for him to get the black vote. So it is part and parcel of the gimmick that is the democratic process, which begs the question, why can't the same process be revitalized for a one Kamala Harris? And if I were to take his word at face value, he unironically makes an excellent case for stripping black people of the right to vote, considering he just said they're politically immature and they vote based on racial lines, not policy. And how has that worked out, generally speaking? And not only do you not care about policy, you only care about race. And that race only becomes relevant when it looks like you could win. In one case, a caucus victory. Or in this case, a coup. How am I doing so far, by the way? I think I'm doing fantastic.
But as far as her development, Kamala was primarily Indian. That's why I say when she went to Howard, just from her life story. Like, you know, how many black people, you know, take bi-yearly trips to India to hang out? I don't know any when I grew up. I don't know any.
How many half black, half Indians do you know? And honestly, how many do you know in your whole life?
I only know one, really.
Right. So is it possible that since you only know one, that's not a fair question? That you don't actually know enough to have that understanding. I know lots of people who are half black, half Indian, including my friend, the children of my friend who just Ibrahim, who just passed away last year. And when I think about that, it's actually quite common. They identify as black, but they also travel to their mother's homeland. So when you say how many people do you know that do that, you're acting as if you know all these black identified half Indians who do something different to her, when in fact, by your own admission, you don't know any.
Yeah,
so but off that point.
But whether you're half black, half Indian, you're saying they're claiming black. So is that a black culture thing to try? It doesn't matter if you're half Indian or not, right?
What I'm saying is that you made a claim that she grew up claiming Indian, and you're saying it as if it's a fact, when in fact she says something different. She wrote a whole memoir about her life story. Did you read it?
I did not.
Okay, so she's told you her life story. You refuse to read it, and you hear what her friends say, and you refuse to believe them. You look at her trajectory and you refuse to acknowledge it, and then you're saying that the evidence is clear. The evidence is only clear if you throw away all the concrete, direct evidence that says the opposite. So it's like it's a willful kind of dismissal of the truth. Like, in all honesty, don't you think you'd be better prepared to answer that question had you read the book and had you listened to her friends' accounts?
Yeah.
So why don't we revisit that part of the point when you actually have enough information to be able to speak on it intelligently? I think that's fair.
That was the wrong move. Uncle Hotep should have said, I don't give a damn about her memoirs. What good is her word? Why would I believe this woman? She was billed as the first Indian American when she became a senator in California. She only became black once she ran for president. In fact, that makes his so-called conspiracy about her needing to shore up her black credentials less conspiratorial and more true because we can see this in real time. Personally, I don't believe people are groomed to be presidents. Groomed to be politicians, perhaps, yes. But anything above that, I think, is some combination of public perception and how well that can be rear-ended by puppeteering fist.
Yeah, come on, man. You can't even.
I'm not done. Hear me out.
But go ahead.
And then when she's when she's at home, not in India, because you're right, her whole house could be New Delhi, in which case don't matter where she travels. I'm just saying, though, you mentioned the trips as if they suggest something. But if you go back to the other part of what she did day, she says she grew up with black music. She says she grew up with black food. She says she grew up with black friends. She says she grew up with black agenda. Not that she did those things instead of the Indian stuff. I'm saying she did both. And so, but you keep talking as if she grew up in this staunch Indian life. And then, because I can show you pictures of her black grandmother. I can show you pictures of her in Jamaica. I can show you her pictures with hoop earrings, bamboo earrings. I can show you pictures of her doing black shit in the day-to-day. And to me, the day-to-day blackness trumps biannual Indianness. If we talk about the markers of blackness. But again, why don't you just read her book where she said her own personal story? Let me put it differently. You act as...
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. At this point, I was giggling my ass off watching Jesus in the middle there, pulling faces, trying not to laugh at this goofball contorting himself into a damn pretzel, trying to convince the world this drunk, allegedly, with no African heritage whatsoever is somehow magically black.
But beyond that, like, for me, it's that whether she's black or not doesn't matter at the level of who we should vote for.
Even though in your own words earlier you said Barack Obama went through a cultural transformation, he only became black in the public conscious once he won Iowa, at which point you ditched Clinton, which according to your own words you did purely because of race. Now all of a sudden you're telling us it doesn't matter. Why?
Let's say you're right, and she's the most Indian person we've ever met. Or let's say I'm right, and she is straight off the boat, West African, never had a drop of white influence or non-black influence in her. Let's say one of us is completely right. It doesn't change the political reality, which is this person in our interests? That's all I care about.
I do wonder if he knows he's lying, or has he done it so much it's basically become this habitual trait that could rival a politician's.
And I'm not saying you're arguing you're making a debate argument against somebody who's saying that she isn't impacted by Indian culture, that she doesn't have a lot of Indian in her. Except I'm not that opponent. I'm saying she does have a lot of Indian in her. She does have Indian culture in her, but that it doesn't negate her blackness. The point that I disputed that you stated was that she came to blackness late. I'm saying she did not. Even when she was making those trips to India, she was still listening to Kool and the Gang. She still had the bamboo earrings on. She still had a crush on Jerry Curl, Michael Jackson. She still spoke black English. She still identified with her black father and black family. Because again, the father and family piece is critical, because if you just do black stuff and go to black places, that don't mean you black.
Oh, don't worry, we'll get back to this point.
But I'm saying she did all the black shit, and she is biologically black, and I mean that in the sense that she has a black father. She ain't Rachel Dolezal in it, right? She's not, pretending to be something she's not.
There is no way in hell you don't have mental problems.
So I'm saying on both fronts, on both counts, she satisfies the conditions for being black. But again, the thing I can't get past is why we're so obsessed with this piece of it. If our mission is to liberate our people, I think it's a better question to ask for me. And I'm happy to stay here if y'all want, because again, I feel very comfortable that I'm making my case. But it seems more important to me to ask the question, is Kamala Harris good for black people? Then is Kamala Harris from black people? Because again, even if she's not, that doesn't change my vote. Even if she is, that doesn't change my vote. Which, unless she just made the whole shit up, because then she's a liar.
Whoa. Hold on a minute there. Before you said all of that stuff in her memoirs is direct, concrete evidence. Your words, by the way. In fact, this was the basis for your entire argument about her black credibility. Now you're saying she could have made it all up, and that would change your vote, even though this change is entirely superficial and it has nothing to do with policy. All the while, you deride people for voting based on race. Again, the shamelessness is insane.
But my point is, we have to determine what's best for us as a community and ask ourselves, is she it? And the is she it question can't get answered by pointing to how black she is genealogically or culturally.
Oh, we're going to come back to this point in a few moments, but let's take a break from this idiot and listen to someone far more sensible, Judge Joe Brown.
And then she was everybody's favorite Hindu Indian prosecutor and attorney general and senator, and now she becomes black. But, I met her daddy, fine gentleman, Professor Harris. And the problem with her being black is Professor Harris says he's Caucasian, mixed Irish and Hindu. He doesn't have any black ancestors, but his Irish ancestors owned a lot of slaves in Jamaica and had them to work on plantation. So if mama is on the birth certificate listed as a Caucasian, daddy says he's a Caucasian Hindu and has no black ancestors, how did she get to be black? She was born, by the way, in the same hospital that my ex-wife was born in, the same 12-month period, and my late mother-in-law was in fact a pediatric nurse in that hospital when Kamala was born. And the birth certificate that she has is interesting because the confusion comes from a mistake. On the birth certificate, it lists the mother's race as Caucasian, national origin India, and religion Hindu. For the father, it does not list national origin, it does not list religion, it does not list anything about that, but where it says race, they put national origin in Jamaica by mistake. Now, if you've ever been to Jamaica and you go over to St. Elizabeth Parish, you see all the high, bright, and white that live in Jamaica. So I've got a good friend retired from law enforcement. He has a white wife, blonde-haired, blue eyes, but she was born in Jamaica. Her parents were born in Jamaica. One's blonde and blue-eyed, the other one's red-haired and gray-eyed. And they happen to be related to the King of England because they are aristocrats in England, but they were born in Jamaica. So if you go over there, you see people from Hong Kong, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, Kenya, South Africa, you name it. It's part of the British Commonwealth and nobody needed a passport and you could just go in and out. So it's not unusual. You're not black just because you're from Jamaica, and they have a whole lot of white people that never left and their ancestors owned a lot of slaves. The Maroons went up into the hill country and got themselves free back in the 1840s, but other than that, it is what it is in Jamaica. So just because you're from that country does not mean you are of the black race. So the problem is why don't you go get your daddy to give you an affidavit that you have a black ancestor? And since the only possible claim you have is through your great-grandmother, who he says was a Hindu house servant, that just happens to be swarthy, where'd you get your blackness from? See, you're faking it again.
Thank you, Judge Joe Brown, for that much-welcomed intermission. Now, who are we going to believe here, The judge or cackling comma chameleon over here, who the media is desperately trying to turn from failing to win a primary idiot into a generic Democrat who can also fill out a diversity checklist? I think I'll go with the judge. What did the guy say before the judge spoke?
We have to determine what's best for us as a community and ask ourselves, is she it? And the is she it question can't get answered by pointing to how black she is genealogically or culturally.
Okay. Never mind for the moment the fact that what he just said made everything else before this completely redundant, which is insane. Let me try and pass this utterly deranged, schizophrenic worldview. At first it was identifying what does black mean because it means different things to different people, and to him it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Even though Kamala Harris, according to him, is definitely black, but not American black because that carries its own distinction based on slavery. So presumably not her because her family owned slaves and didn't come from them. Which begs the question, why on earth would someone who comes from slave-owning genes be pro-reparations for a group that she doesn't even belong to? But anyway, but she has identified with her father's Jamaican blackness through Americanized, culturally black traits and habits. Even though her father is Caucasian, he is not black. So she doesn't have any black ancestry, which removes one of Marc's requirements for so-called blackness, which shouldn't matter anyway, because on the one hand he says she has apparently done all this black stuff, yet on the other hand, doing black stuff doesn't make you black. All of which begs the question, what the bloody hell was the point of any of this? How does anyone think this man is anything above an idiot who talks out of his ass? If you happen to be able to bypass this meandering BS, you will easily spot why he speaks in this nebulous kind of manner. It's because he has no mind. He has no conviction in anything. He's a shapeshifter. Blackness is nothing but a concept made to be malleable to suit the whims of his political agenda. And that's all. There is nothing more to him than that. The next part, however, is really, really funny.
They asked Kamala who's the greatest rapper alive, and she said Tupac. You know damn well she's not black. She couldn't give a Kendrick, couldn't give a Jay-Z, couldn't give a Nas.
Who's the first name you said?
Kendrick
Lamar?
Jay-Z or Nas.
Wait, did you say Kendrick Lamar?
Yeah.
When they asked Kendrick Lamar who the greatest rapper of all time is, you know who he said?
No, he said, Uncle Hotep said greatest rapper alive. He didn't say of all time.
Alive.
Alive.
I heard it. And he's saying that she said Tupac and not Kendrick, Nas, or Jay-Z, for example. What I'm saying is, when they asked one of the three people he thinks are eligible for the GOAT status, Kendrick Lamar, who the GOAT was, Kendrick Lamar has been asked who the GOAT is. You know who Kendrick Lamar thinks is the GOAT? Tupac. So it's a little interesting that Kamala is disqualified. Her blackness is disqualified for not saying Kendrick, for saying no,
they
Tupac.
said alive though. Tupac.
Kendrick himself is saying Tupac.
But they said alive. Tupac is allegedly dead.
Alive, not Tupac.
You talking about the alive?
Years, man.
They asked her.
I'm sorry.
Hold on. Let me hop in right here. Let me hop in right here just to clarify. The question was who is the greatest rapper alive, and she said Tupac.
That's fair.
You know, either she's telling us Tupac is still alive, or she can't name somebody alive, and I think that's the point Uncle Hotep was trying to make. But the question was greatest rapper alive.
So I'm sorry, Uncle Hotep's dial-up service was glitching. I didn't actually. He was in and out. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I didn't hear the alive part. Forgive me. That's my mistake. I own that.
Oh, you ain't owning shit, bitch. You lied, and we can prove it. Roll it back.
No, he said Uncle Hotep said greatest rapper alive. He didn't say of all time.
Alive.
I heard it.
Right there, you said you heard it. There was nothing wrong with this connection. You lied. You jumped the gun. You ended up smoking your own ass. Now let's watch him try and backpedal because, oh man, is it glorious.
So,
You see what I mean now with the stutter and the buffering?
this is the kind of, I would call it superficiality or silliness that the media does to everybody, right?
Before it's interesting how for this her blackness is disqualified, but change one variable and all of a sudden he will dance to a different tune. Now it's the media's fault. You are the media trying to sell this bullshit she's black. Talking about superficiality, you were sweating buckets, son, downloading your NPC response in real time. All you were talking about this whole damn time was her genes and her perceived blackness, which even according to you doesn't mean anything. Now, just from my point of view, I am far more likely to believe she doesn't know a damn thing about rap. And here is why.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like in
And
college?
I inhaled. I did inhale.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. But yes.
I know you have to go. They say you have to go. I just wanted to
I
ask.
just broke news.
I mean, was it in college?
Uh-huh.
See, I like stuff like that. That's a real honest
It's
answer.
real.
Was it a blunt or joint?
It was a joint.
Hey.
Yeah.
You remember the high?
I do.
What does Kamala Harris listen to?
What were you
What's your
listening to when
favorite-
you was high? What was on? What song was
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, definitely Snoop. Tupac for
Tupac.
sure.
Yeah, just one problem, Toots. You graduated from Howard in 86 and then got a law degree at Hastings in 89. Tupac's first album didn't drop until 91 and Snoop's in 93. I gotta ask, for someone who claims none of this stuff matters, yet you also claim to have read her damn memoirs, looked up her family tree to justify her so-called blackness, through the words of her friends, her music taste, her attire, even down to her damn diet, all of which you admitted could even be a lie, which you said would change your vote, even though none of that has anything to do with policy. Why on earth are you debasing yourself this hard, twisting your nuts in for someone as woefully inadequate and incompetent as this woman? Not only does that make you look stupid and insane, you look thoroughly emasculated, or at the very least bought and paid for. Watch the original video. He stumbles through this unhinged rambling for more than 4 minutes trying to defend her answer. It's pathetic. It's been almost 40 minutes and you haven't mentioned dick about nary a damn policy. You're a cheap, two-faced race hustler and nothing more. But let's hear his concerns, why don't we?
There are people out there who believe that Donald Trump is a better choice for them and that his outcome is better. I'm willing to have the debate to talk about why I disagree with them.
Yeah, after almost an hour of this word salad wank, it would be nice if you could get to that fucking point already.
But I don't demonize those people either. Just make the decision that you think is best for our community. I just happen to believe that this election cycle in particular, because of the Supreme Court,
Where they cheered the historic first of putting a black woman on the Supreme Court, who couldn't define what a woman even is. And then again, neither can Mark.
because of some of the specific issues that are passing right now around diversity initiatives,
Diversity initiatives. Huh, that one's interesting.
around reproductive justice.
The capacity to engage in recreational sex and use abortion like it's a damn contraceptive is not reproductive justice, you Orwellian freak. That's just psychotic.
Around the Exxon rule, a decision around federal executive power. There are things that I'm worried about that strategically I think it's better to choose Kamala, not because she's her, but because she's not him. And for me, that's enough, because I don't worship or fall before any of these people. I don't care about none of them at the level of politicians. So that's all I'm saying.
You haven't actually said anything. You haven't said why they are concerns, just that they are.
No, I mean, jokes aside, he's going to do best on immigration. And I think in the longer run, that's going to affect Black Americans, FBA, ADOS, more than anything else. You know, there's been lawsuits in Chicago. There's less jobs and more increased job competition. We have to do something about the unchecked flow of immigration. And I think that would be in our best interest.
Mark, how do you respond to that? Do you agree with that? You disagree with that? Or do you want to switch gears and tell us why Kamala is better for black people?
Now, this part to me is fascinating because this man will completely avoid Uncle Hotep's point about the long term, and not just for black people, but the well-being of the nation overall. He will focus solely on currently and only on jobs, with no nuance beyond that whatsoever. Watch.
I'll do both. I'll do it real fast too. I don't believe it matters how I feel about it. I think that we have to look at the actual numbers, the data, the facts, the evidence.
I guarantee you, if I brought in some evidence and data and facts when it comes to, say, European history, conquest and conquer, civilization development, he would not approve of any of them. Especially not when it comes to South Africa, but I digress. But let me get this straight. You're the person who said you will pick evidence that supports your claim. You also claim to be an abolitionist and that the entire system is corrupt. Do tell, how many of those millions of illegals coming in across the border do you think are working? Working or not, they're still criminals, and anyone paying them is engaging in criminal activity as well, by the way. So what kind of corrupt federal-level coordination is facilitating that mass amount of people? And why? If they're taking jobs that nobody wants, why doesn't a state facilitate them coming in legally? What kind of an agreement does the federal government have with the state governments that benefits them enough to help coordinate all of this? Someone's palms are getting greased here. I will bet my life on that, because no politician ever does anything without personal benefit. Why? That would be some form of corruption. You know corruption, right, Mark? It's that thing you claim to be against, you lying two-faced sack of shit. How do you think this impacts the legal generation of state revenue versus how much this is all costing the regular American taxpayer? You know, the ones you want to steal from to pay for shit you deem important. Or do you just enjoy being parasitic under the guise of being morally superior?
But in this context, I think data and evidence and facts should matter. Objective analysis should matter.
You can't even apply objective analysis to pregnancy. You are woefully unfit to qualify what passes for objectivity.
And the objective analysis is that no, these jobs aren't being taken. But part of how fascism works.
Ah, yes, fascism, that word used by desperate morons to scare other morons.
Is that a really powerful, influential, singular figure will come and have you thinking. They'll go to the everyday person and say, hey, everyday person, I'm just like you. That's what Trump does, right? He's brilliant, right?
Tell me you've never watched Trump in your entire life without telling me you've never watched Trump in your entire life. That's what every cringeworthy politician tries to do. Suck up to the everyday American by pretending their DC-infected souls are akin to that of the working man. Is one of many, many reasons they're hated, because they're more fake and plastic than Hollywood. Trump does not do that. In fact, that's why people like him. Because he openly says, no, I'm not like you, I'm really rich, I fly in a private jet. Real Americans are straight shooting and honest, authentic, sincere. Well, at least the southern ones. You know, all those things that you aren't. Trump has those traits, that's why he's relatable. It's not class, it's attitude. He doesn't get discouraged, and he doesn't know the meaning of the word quit. He's like a bull, and men like that quality in a general. Not that you would understand any of this, of course.
When I talk to everyday working class white people, they be like, I can identify with Trump. Trump ain't never worked. He's a billionaire, right?
Case in point, the far leftist doesn't understand a billionaire works to get money, or the mind of the working class. Shocking.
But he's one of us. And he says to them, you know what your problem is? You know what you got to do? It's that guy over there.
Yes, says the guy who tells his own kin. You know what your problem is? You know what your problem is? It's that white guy over there that had ancestors, apparently, that enslaved yours. Never mind who sold your ancestors or why, that part's irrelevant. But they owe you. You're entitled to money. Now vote for us so we can steal from the white... redistribute the wealth more equitably. CJ knows a pimp when he sees one. I know a cheap thief when I see one. He's talking about illegal immigrants, by the way. You know illegal immigrants, the border problem that is such a crisis, it is one of the top issues of this election cycle, to the point where it was a question in the debate some weeks ago. This doesn't even address the bloody problem. All this amounts to is a typical leftist twat saying if you want a functioning nation state, you must be some kind of fascist.
So people who have 90% of the wealth, they then tell the 10%, the people who have the 10%, to fight with each other over each slice of that 10% while they eat the 90, you know? And that becomes a Trump strategy. But if we're talking about immigration in particular, his approach does not help black people.
Do you think he's actually going to explain how he got to that conclusion? No, of course not.
And it's cruel, and it's inhumane, and I would say ultimately it violates international. It doesn't necessarily violate international law. I think that's actually not necessarily true, because there are ways that sometimes people are passing through other countries and should be getting relief there before they come here. But that doesn't mean ultimately that we don't have a moral responsibility.
Come again? A moral responsibility. Since when is it the moral responsibility of the state to loot the taxpayer dry to house millions of criminals? So not only are you an idiot who knows nothing about basic nation-state duties, you really are a thief. Man, the amount of jokes I want to make right now. I'm just blown away that this man's entire grift is to suck the teeth of the state, claiming black Americans deserve reparations, yet he's totally fine with illegal stealing from the taxpayer. I don't even understand how that makes any kind of fucking sense.
My reason for saying that for Kamala is that I think that black people are at our best not when white people give us handouts or philanthropy or generosity. Black people are at our best when people simply get out the way. You know why we kick ass in sports? We just watch the Olympics. You know why black people win in sports? Because the playing field is level, the goals are clear, the rules are public, and the officiating is fair.
Unless it's breakdancing, in which case your entire thesis falls apart. But really, this level of double-R speak is getting ridiculous now. Early on, one of his main concerns with Trump was diversity initiatives. Doesn't want handouts, but wants reparations. Now he wants fairness. This man is so insanely two-faced, he's actually pissing me off. Far as the Olympics goes, yes, not because of genetics or anything. It's funny they will scream some BS about structural racism, except when they're overrepresented in sports, then it's just because they're better. There, natural talent shines, but no other groups are superior at every other aspect of human achievement for some reason.
The referee is impartial, right? When that happens, black people will succeed just like everybody else.
Newsflash for you, genius. You can't advocate for a level playing field and diversity initiatives. Well, not unless you're a radical far leftist, and therefore full of shit.
What I want, and what I think we need, is not for the government to give us shit that we don't deserve, but to level the playing field by giving us what we do deserve, which is reparations.
I noticed that black athletes, actors, musicians, and businessmen don't need reparations to be successful. Could it possibly be because you have nothing useful to sell your kin except a snake oil of an anchor to keep them on the far left plantation? Oh, I think so. Secondly, I'm gonna be brutally honest here. Anyone who talks about reparations in 2024 is a grifting loser at best or a pathetic groveler at worst. Who the hell do you think you are to demand any resources from anyone? You have no power or authority. Oh, boo-hoo, your ancestors were sold as slaves. You haven't done a damn day's work against your will. Your reparations is the fact that you aren't in Africa. Count yourself lucky. By ancient law of conquest and conquer, you lost. You aren't owed a damn thing. Now get over it.
And the we is not all black people. It's not the Kamala Harrises of the world, who I think is black but doesn't deserve reparations. It's the descendants of slavery. We deserve reparations. Kamala Harris is not a reparations hawk. She's not out here trying to give us reparations, but she's also not out here trying to block it in the way that Trump is. Kamala Harris believes in investment in public education, investment in roads, investments in infrastructure, investment in minority business.
It's been over an hour, and he finally says something about Kamala Harris that he likes, and oh, what do you know? The so-called abolitionist who thinks the whole system is corrupt is suddenly very much in favor of the system once it involves spending somebody else's money on things he thinks are important. That's not even a political platform, that's the MO of a parasite. Newsflash here, just because you get resources does not mean you will make good use of them. Take a look at history. If a community needs the state to invest in it, that's because that community is a leech of resources. And what little resources they do get is to sway them to vote a certain way.
Those are things that I think matter. Again, Kamala Harris is not our savior. I would give her a C- if I were being generous in terms of how good she is for us. I just think Donald Trump is a D+. And or D-. I'm gonna take the C+, whereas Uncle Hotep likes to take the D.
Pause. Oh my God.
That was a
so
joke.
Mark. Mark. This is my issue with the conversation.
That was a jab. It was. I got it. Go ahead.
When it comes to the Kamala versus Trump debate, there's always the denigration of Trump, right? But there's never any evidence as to what Kamala's going to do. So that's why I asked you, why do you think Kamala's going to be better for the black community?
Right. And my answer was that I think some of it is not so much her doing more, but getting out of the way and not blocking things like reparations. But then I gave you specific things that she would do. I said investment in public education, investment in infrastructure. Remember those things I said? Investment in minority businesses. Those are concrete things that she will do. Those are concrete things that I said she will do.
Can you imagine how dangerously high and out of touch with reality you have to be after the last 4 years to take Kamala Harris at her word? Why? What on earth makes you think that's a sensible position to take? What the hell has she been doing for the last 4 years anyway? If these are good, competent, or desired policies, why hasn't she said a word about them? Hell, why hasn't she tried to implement any of them?
Bidenomics has been something that both the president and the vice president has worked on.
Not only that, but none of these policies involve getting out of the way. Every policy he talks about involves spending somebody else's money. By the way, if you want to watch the whole video, this This delusional, childlike idealism of Harris is legitimately the depth of his entire argument. Seriously, in almost 100 minutes, this is all he offered. I honestly cannot get over how full of shit this man is. Either he is maliciously deceitful, or he is one gullible moron. I'm leaning towards the latter, by the way, because if your entire shtick is to bitch about corruption, but you believe the solution is to hand the machinery more power under the assumption that the bureaucracy will all of a sudden conform to your ideals and morals. Keep in mind, this man is near 46 years old. How? I don't even know.
Why do we have such fear of Trump when we did 4 years of this guy?
That is the smartest question that was asked during this entire debate, in my opinion. And the reply was arse.
The sky didn't fall.
Very true, which is why Trump touts his record versus the current state of affairs constantly.
Outside of, COVID, COVID was the worst thing that happened. And if you're going to blame that, pin that on him, I don't know what else to say. That could have happened under any administration. There's nothing really he could have done, in my opinion.
May I remind you people yet again, this clown is halfway to 50 and he's pulling faces like a 5-year-old. When I see this kind of spectacle, this kind of rhetoric, my mind sees this as an entity with poor coding, and it really doesn't go much further than that.
But we all survived. We're still here. We all went through. We all came through it. We're here.
Nobody died?
Huh?
You mean everybody who didn't die is still here? I mean, that's crazy. We're all still here except the people that died.
How did that get pinned on Trump?
That's a fair question. It was a global event and each state handled it differently. That is how the United States works. The federal government is not supposed to overreach and micromanage over 330 million people. Not that it would do a good job of that anyway.
No. I was just responding to your point that we all survived it. We didn't all survive it. People died. A lot of people died. That's just not true. We didn't all survive it, is all I'm saying.
Due to a global pandemic that he really had nothing to do with.
Here's an idea for you. How about instead of pulling faces, you pull an answer at the same place you've reached in for this entire debate? Your ass.
Well, if you're saying something else he had something to do with, but
I'm waiting for the moderator. I want to hear you out fully, and then I'll respond. I want to hear you out fully.
That was due to COVID. That was out of his control, wasn't it? Was it not?
No, that's not true. That's not factually true. Trump was left with, and I write about this in my book, We Still Here. Trump was left with pandemic guidelines by the Obama administration.
Yeah, because that was a good administration.
I'm looking at my notes here to find it. Yeah, at the end of his second term, this is from my book, so I want y'all to think he's getting fed lines by the Democratic machines that own him. This is my own book. I just don't have my books memorized. I said at the end of his second term, President Barack Obama's team of scientific advisors left Trump with a 69-page pandemic playbook that offered concrete strategies for responding to a crisis like COVID-19. The playbook discussed the importance of obtaining personal protective equipment, PPEs, as we all know now.
That a certain rat said was ineffective.
Having a clear and unified communication system with the public.
Which you can't enforce without grossly violating civil liberties.
And most of all, an urgent, all-out government commitment to eliminating the pandemic as quickly as possible.
Which they could have done simply by doing nothing.
Trump ignored all three.
Okay. First off, to lay the entire response down to Trump shows a gross misunderstanding of, well, frankly, not even America's government structure, but just basic coordination of any mass bureaucratic structure. Secondly, you're assuming those so-called concrete guidelines would have done a better job. And you have absolutely no evidence for this because it's purely speculative. If you're dealing with constant changes, actions, reactions, a concrete playbook does not account for any of those fluctuations. Lastly, Biden derided the Trump administration for their death toll, saying anyone with X amount of people dying under their reign should step down. And then lo and behold, more people died under his tenure. Now people can say, well, it lasted longer under Biden. That makes it even worse because you claim Trump was doing a bad job and Biden's performance is even poorer. The reason why it lasted longer is because he failed. Did he follow those Obama guidelines or not? If Biden did, they sucked and resulted in a higher death toll. If he didn't, why didn't he follow the so-called better guidelines, Mark? Is he going to speak on that? No, of course he isn't. And last one here. This one is just a shout out to Jesus, because when he grabs the mic, oh, does he cook at the end here.
So do you have a similarly challenging adversarial question for my debate opponent? Because if someone were listening to this right now, they think I was debating you. And I'm fine with that. I can beat both of you simultaneously.
Can you fuck? You put your foot in your mouth more often than Biden gets challenged by a flight of stairs.
But I'm just curious to know if you also had a question for him.
Now, so here's the thing, right? We got a lot of people watching. And you mentioned something about black jobs. And I said to you, I was unable to follow your line of thinking, and I wanted to be able to follow your line of thinking.
You follow it now?
No. Hell no.
So
Don't worry, Jesus, you ain't the only one.
there's two different things.
I'm still talking.
You could follow my line of thinking and disagree, or you could not follow my actual logic. I am making a logical argument, which is
Bullshit. You're a far leftist. Your entire worldview is built upon bitching about reality and then trying to avoid it. You are fundamentally incapable of logic.
black
But you
people
don't listen.
are
You're not. But you're
presumably
not following my line of logic, because
do
I just
follow your
told you that these unemployment statistics are bullshit, and you still went back to them.
Right, and I asked you, what should we use as, I said, I'm happy to use, I think you forgot this part. I said, I'm happy to use a different metric, but you have to
I want to use your metric and follow your line of thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Hold on. Brother, you just said you don't trust my unemployment statistics as an accurate, you're saying they're bullshit. You literally just
No, I said I want to follow your line of thinking.
Oh, I misunderstood. Did you not just say the unemployment statistics are bullshit that I did? You said that, right?
That's one point, but there's a second point that you made. There's a second point. There's a second point that you made, and that's the point I was trying to understand. That has.
Hold on.
You said that black people weren't filling those jobs.
Okay, so Mark's point was that illegals aren't taking over black jobs. They're taking jobs that nobody wants. Never mind the corruption, potential tax evasion, or exploit their labor. No. Hotep brought up a case, I think in Chicago, of a factory that ended up hiring black people after the illegals were expunged. So Jesus' point was he wants to follow Mark's line of thinking, and so he needs to use Mark's data and metrics, or else the conclusion is going to look kind of screwy, hence why he can't make any sense of what Mark is trying to say. Now watch Mark fail to understand basic statistics.
Right, so I want to address both of the points. So to the first point, right, before we go to the second one, then I got to go. To the first point that they're bullshit. If you think they're bullshit, I'm saying fine, I will concede that. What should we use to measure black people's success in the job market other than labor statistics? I'm asking you, fine, they're bullshit. What do you use instead? How do you measure it? That's a direct question.
I think we got to go into each community and go based upon the labor statistics in each community, and not zoom out and do a macro thing, because everything could be skewed based upon all the vicinities that are included in that data.
State labor statistics, just not federal labor statistics.
No, I think it's be more accurate if we said, let's go based upon Detroit labor statistics and include anecdotal data. I don't think we can just use this empirical data and not. No, I'm just saying, if we look at the case I was talking about where we had this manufacturing facility and 1,800 jobs are just gone because they kicked the illegals out, and then those jobs were then filled by black people. It's like the argument falls apart to say that black people haven't filled those jobs. And the thing with the illegal immigration is this isn't a new problem, right? So when you say black people weren't filling these jobs, illegal immigration has been hurting us probably more than 20 decades. 2 decades.
Really?
So when we look back, we're looking at illegal immigration. Those jobs haven't been filled by black people because they've been filled by other people. And many of those jobs we're talking about are like construction jobs and warehouse jobs and manufacturing jobs and factory jobs. I don't think it's fair to say that black people won't fill those jobs when we just saw a case where they did. That's where I'm losing the train of thought. I think it's kind of weird to say black people wouldn't fill those jobs. I think they would fill those jobs. I think there's a lot of brothers that I spoke to personally, and we can go based upon empirical data, but I also think we can't discount anecdotal data, because I know when I was unemployed, I'd have took any job I could have got. I think we don't take into account the lack of, push to blue collar work, right? The lack of training and vocational. We push a lot of college on kids, but we don't push vocational to the young black boys. They've taken vocational work out of the high schools. They've taken. No, I want to do this to create some clarity, so you can give me some better clarity. But they've taken vocational out of high school, and the boys aren't being trained.
Notice how impatient he gets? This dude has had over an hour to ramble on, basically non-stop, and the moment somebody else tries to talk for more than 30 seconds, he's rolling his head around like a damn teenage girl.
To take on those blue-collar jobs, whereas many of these illegals, they come with those skills, they come with that training. So I think the reason why those jobs aren't being fulfilled because they're going with people who already have those skills, but we haven't been given those skills. So I think there's more to the conversation than black people won't fill those jobs. I think they would if given an opportunity and given some nurturing.
Solid argument. Basically invest in homegrown people. Nothing wrong with that, which is funny because this is the very same thing Marc himself advocated for earlier.
Right. So you said a few things there. You said you don't trust federal statistics, but you said maybe not state, but maybe city. The federal statistics come from the reports that the city statistics give them and the state gives them.
They're aggregated.
So they're all right. So the federal statistics aren't more reliable as just a matter of fact. This is not opinion. They're not more or less reliable than city. You can say the city's bullshit too, but you can't say I trust city statistics and not state or federal. That just doesn't make sense. But
they're aggregated.
Right. They're aggregated from the people who you trust. Right?
No, so they're aggregated.
What does aggregated mean?
Put them all together.
Right. So you're saying city you trust, country you don't. And I'm saying the federal statistics are literally, you can literally look and unpack it yourself and count.
Oh my God, I've seen this so many times. I can't freaking do this.
Reported shows up in the state report. What gross point shows up in the report, and you add them all up, and that's what Michigan.
You know, I had the exact same expression as Jesus there. He actually can't understand that the more you zoom in on a local level, the more of the finer details you're going to catch, because the outliers are not the norm, hence what they're called outliers. So once you start pulling in more bulk data, aggregation is going to drown them out. This is Basic Stats 101 over here. How he doesn't understand this is mind-blowing. Actually, no, I take it back. It really is not unexpected after everything we've seen. Man, I wish Jesus asked me if he understands per capita. You know, right after asking me if he had breakfast this morning. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.